Now, if you're going to be working in any type of Microsoft administration services these days, there are some fundamental principles that are very important that you understand. So what I want to do is I want to get into some of the foundations of understanding things like Microsoft domains, understanding some of the networking technologies, RAS and VPNs and virtualization, and also we're going to talk about the cloud services and how all that fits into this. But it's important to kind of start from the beginning so you can understand where things have been, understand where things are going, and you have to consider the fact that the world is transitioning now more into a cloud-oriented environment. But in the past, everything was managed on-prem or on-premise, and we got to talk about this transition and how things were and how things are now and where Microsoft is going. So to start with, we go back in time to the 1950s, 1960s. They had mainframes, these gigantic computers that would take up like entire rooms. They used vacuum tubes. And then as we moved into the 1970s, something miraculous happened. They created what was known as an IC, an integrated circuit, which allowed basically binary math to be processed through little chips. And this is where personal computing became popular. So in the 1980s, personal computers started coming out. I'm going to draw this little symbol here to represent a computer. And I tell you what, I'm going to create another little symbol here to kind of represent a bunch of computers. So in the 1980s, companies started buying PCs and personal computers, and they started showing up in people's offices, and eventually, they were networking them together and all of that. And so this is where things really get started. Now, of course, in those days, one of the problems was we lived in what was called a peer-to-peer network. So what would happen is these computers you could network these computers together with various technologies, but there was no centralization, meaning each computer was equal. There was no computer that controls all the other computers. A network admin would have to, if they wanted to make changes, they'd have to sit down at each and every computer to make those changes or get users to help them, which was always a nightmare. And so that didn't, it worked, but it didn't work very efficiently, all right? Now, as we moved into the 1990s, there was a company that was gaining ground called Novell, and they had a product called NetWare, which was the idea of that was to use a server that would help manage machines and also allow people to share files easier. Whereas in a peer-to-peer network back originally, these machines would have to share files with each other and people would have to know each other's passwords. It just didn't work very well. Well, eventually with the creation of the file server concept, you had a more powerful machine that you could share files on and all that. And eventually Novell even came out with the idea of a server that could manage other machines. Now this is kind of where Microsoft comes in. Microsoft created their product called NT, and they created this concept of a domain controller, which is a special type of server that can manage these other servers. Now, fast forward, they came out with what was known as a domain, but fast forward to the year 2000, Microsoft releases their newest domain technology, and they call it Active Directory. And Active Directory domains were represented by a triangle. All right, and a domain controller was a server essentially that had a database on it, and that database was the Active Directory database. So let's just kind of fix that here. This little cylinder looking thing I'm going to make here is going to represent my Active Directory database. So AD. All right, and this is what we still call to this day. We call it ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services. And usually if you hear that term, Active Directory Domain Services, it means it's an on-premise domain. Although there is a version of this that can be hosted in the cloud known as Azure Active Directory Domain Services. I'm not getting into that right now. So anyway, you would always want to have more than one domain controller. The reason you want to have more than one domain controller is because the same reason you have more than one of any type of server, really. One reason being to break up the disbursement of load, these machines will authenticate with these domain controllers, and the more machines you got, you know, you don't want all of that just going to one domain controller, right? The other consideration is redundancy. If you only have one and that server goes down, well, you're in trouble, right? So we want to have multiple. The other thing about domain controllers that are interesting is that they replicate. So, for example, I'm going to make a little smiley face guy here, and this little smiley face guy is going to represent my user. So we create a user account on a domain controller. Now, the interesting thing about user accounts, or the interesting thing really about domain controllers, is that they replicate. So everything you do on one will replicate over to the other. So if I create a user account on that first one, well, replication is going to occur between both of them. And so this little arrow thing I'm going to make here is going to represent replication. So domain controllers replicate. That means that this user could log on to any one of these thousands machines, and it's going to, you know, authenticate with the domain controller. All right. The authentication protocol that is used is the protocol known as Kerberos. All right. Kerberos is the authentication protocol. What is a protocol? It's like a language, basically. Okay. Now there was an older protocol that it also supported called NTLM. That was for legacy, for older prior to the year 2000 machines. Now that protocol allowed us to have encrypted passwords and all that, and authenticate securely and all that fun stuff. The other thing is Active Directory uses a language known as the Directory Service Language, and that language was called LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. Now all that is, again, this is all decades old at this point. At the time when it came out, it was cutting edge, but it is a bit dated nowadays. But it still works, and it's still pretty secure, though there are some considerations on security that I'm not going to explain right now. Now, the other thing that's important about Active Directory is that all machines have to have a name. And the name must be, of course, associated with an IP address and all of that. And so there is a service that we use it on the internet all the time, called DNS, Domain Name Service. Our domain must have a name. Usually when you name your domain, you would name it after your company, and a lot of people even name their domains based on their web presence. So for example, my domain might be called examlabpractice.com. That's my company, my web presence. And I'm going to need to have a server in my domain that can associate the names and IP addresses together. So that server is called a DNS server. DNS, Domain Name System Server. And that server will also have to have a little database on it, and that database will be our DNS database. Okay. So we'll just draw another little cylinder, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this, border it with red, and then I'm going to color code the database red, which means that this database, the DNS database, is associated with that name. Now what happens is our machines, clients, domain controllers, we also might even have, let's draw a file server over here. Pretty common that we have file servers in our environment. Okay. All of these machines would register with our DNS. All right. And this allows for the centralization of name resolution, meaning they register their IP addresses into this database, and then now anytime a machine needs to find another machine, it can query DNS. So for example, these machines all have to authenticate by your domain controllers. They can query DNS and say, hey, DNS, do you know what the address is of one of my domain controllers so I can authenticate? And DNS can reply back and say, yeah, here is the information. At that point, the client can go and authenticate. So it works very efficiently. Now, all of this together, this idea of domain controllers, this triangle you see here, this provides centralization. So we moved away from peer-to-peer networking back in the day where, you know, every machine was kind of its own boss and there was no centralized way of managing things, to now we are working in a centralized environment. These domain controllers help us centralize. This DNS service helps us centralize. So we now have some central control over things. One of the great things about our domain controllers too is we have these wonderful things called GPOs, group policy objects. A group policy object is this object that you can create that has all these settings, parameters, any type of attribute you want to configure or change on machines, you can do it through a GPO. So for example, if your boss walks up to you and says, hey, I want you to force the firewalls to be turned on all these machines. I want to make sure that the antivirus is always up to date. I want you to disable some of the wallpaper feature. I don't want people putting crazy wallpapers on their machine. So I mean, the sky's the limit. There are literally thousands of things you can do inside of a GPO. But what happens is that GPO can instruct these machines to turn things on and turn things off. GPOs also replicate. So when you create a GPO on a domain controller, it replicates over to the other domain controller. So it doesn't matter which machines, authenticate with which domain controller. All right. So these GPOs can be deployed out to these machines, and this is how you turn things on, turn things off. You could even deploy software with that if you wanted to. So it was very, very powerful, a very, very powerful system for managing everything. All right. Of course, let's throw the internet into the mix here. Let's say that this little cloud is going to represent the internet, and let's talk about a little bit about how that sort of fits into the picture. Let me just clean it up here with the mighty stroke of my paintbrush. I will clean up the internet. All right. All right, so then we have the internet, right? So maybe we've got an internet connection that's coming in here, all right? And of course, you don't want to just leave your internal network exposed, so your company would generally have a firewall, right? And we'll just put that firewall right here. And so now we have a secure way for traffic to flow out to the internet, and the only things that can come in would be things that we send out, and we could allow things through that firewall if we want to. Now, this is a traditional domain. This is the way we've done things for 20 years, all right? And in this next little section, I want to talk about expansion on all of this and where things have gone with things like RAS and all that, and VPN and virtualization. So that'll wrap this little section up, and we'll move on to the next. I now want to talk about some concepts that are also sort of the foundation of how we've done things over the years. It's important to understand how we've done things over the years so we can understand how things are now. So looking back, we have an Active Directory domain, ADDS as it's called, Active Directory Domain Services, which uses the LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, which uses Kerberos for authentication, or for the legacy back in the 90s devices that used NTLM, New Technology LAN Manager, which isn't all very new these days, but even Kerberos is pretty old considering, we've been using it for decades, and I think actually the protocol even came out back in the 1980s. So, we got some data technologies, but the technologies have been updated, a lot of them over the years, to be secure, so you can still feel comfortable using those. But let's talk about some different scenarios now. The first thing I want to look at is the scenario of what happens when we have a user who is not at the office. So this person is working from home. Working from home is a lot more popular nowadays than it has been in the past, so it's very common. And this person needs the ability perhaps to be able to connect in and access services that are inside. Okay, and we've got a file server, but ultimately you probably are aware that in the past it was always this mindset of do it yourself, host your own server. So your companies might have a file server, but then they might also have a they might have a SQL database server that users need to access. Let's create that SQL. All right. Maybe Microsoft Exchange. That was email, right? Microsoft Exchange was used for email, and then maybe even like SharePoint was very popular. by Microsoft on premise. So here you've got these, these 4 servers providing a service to our devices, and you've got users working from home and everything else needing to get access to those. Let me just kind of move those a little bit over here, make a little bit of room here, and I'm going to shrink those down just a little bit as well. All right. So this user who is working from home needs to access these services, but the person is not, not around. Well, let me tell you what you shouldn't do. You shouldn't just open up all the ports on the firewall and allow this person in to get access to these devices unsecurely. In fact, in the 90s, a lot of companies did that. The very first company I ever worked for, back in the 90s, they didn't really have a firewall, so you literally could share out you had a public address, and you could connect to it from home. It was really scary when I think about it. Even in the 90s, that was scary, but nowadays it's incredibly scary. Why is it scary? Because you got these people out there that want to do things that they shouldn't do, and get access to companies' data and try to do damage and ransom and all of that, ransomware and all that. And who are these people? Well, we generally call them hackers, right? So let me draw a little hacker. This little box here is going to represent my hacker. All right, and let's make this hacker look like he's up to no good. All right, I'm gonna give him let's give him like a devil horns, some devil horns here, and maybe he's in a bad mood. I'll give him a frowny face, and give him some fangs, and maybe the fangs are dripping blood okay, no, I'm just kidding. Sorry, sometimes I get carried away. All right, but anyway, that's going to be my hacker. All right, goofy looking little hacker person. All right, and so we don't want this hacker spying on my user. We don't want this hacker getting access to resources inside. So how do we get around that? Well, usually the way we would do that is you would use a VPN, a virtual private network. So the way you would do that is you could purchase what was called a VPN concentrator, and basically it's a device that allows secure connections in. But in the Microsoft world, we actually had a type of server we could set up called a RAS server, or also known as an RAS server because it stood for Routing and Remote Access Services. But anyway, remote access services is the idea here, and with that we have support for VPN. Now what does that do? This allows this thing called a VPN tunnel to be created, which means that you have this encrypted communications that goes through to that RAS server, and then from there that RAS server allows you to access other resources securely. This hacker will not be able to see the traffic that's flowing through because it's all encrypted. The only thing the hacker would be able to see is that it was going up to this firewall, and that would be it. Wouldn't be able to see what the traffic said. So this is how we would definitely help secure things. Now, the other thing that I want to talk to you about here is what happens when a company needs to have a service that is exposed to the internet. For example, let's say that your company is going to host their own web server, okay? So you set up a web server. All right, maybe this is going to be www.examlabpractice.com or whatever, and people from the internet need to be able to get to it anonymously. Well, how are you going to do that? Where are you going to put that web server? Are you going to put it internally inside the domain like you see here? And the reason that's scary is because you would have to open up port 443, port 80, which is the HTTP ports, to allow traffic to get in, which means not only could somebody out there on the internet anonymously get into this web server, but technically so could a hacker. And if a hacker was ever to gain access over this website by hacking it, then something called pivoting could occur, where a hacker could actually gain access to these other services that are on your network. And so that's where things are really scary. So you definitely won't want to host it internally most of the time, although there was a way to do something called a reverse proxy. I won't get into that right now. But we would probably want to put this outside, right? So we'd want to put it out here. But there's something else that's a problem on that. If you put it outside that firewall, you don't have to worry about people getting allowing traffic to come in. But the scary thing about that is the fact that this poor web server is now completely exposed to the internet, so with no protection. So the way around that usually is people would get another firewall. So you'd have two firewalls. This first firewall would be called the internal connected firewall, and then this firewall here would be called the external connected firewall. Now this little network between that, we would call that a DMZ, demilitarized zone, or now the more popular term is perimeter network. Okay, so DMZ, perimeter network are basically the same thing. All right. And so now what you would do is you would only open the ports like port 80, 443, 53 for DNS if you put DNS in there, whatever ports there that you need, and now traffic would be able to get to this web server. Okay, and so even if a hacker somehow hacks this web server, you're not going to allow traffic to pass through this firewall and get to these resources. The only traffic that you might allow would be VPN. Okay, and there's a bunch of authentication and all that has to happen to make that work. All right, so that's the idea of remote access and VPNs in a nutshell for you, as well as the concept of DMZ and the perimeter network idea. Now, the final thing I want to look at with you in this video is the idea of virtualization. So I talked about how in the past it was always the mindset was we got to host everything ourselves. We got to have our own little data center. We got to have our we got to have our own servers, file server, SQL, Exchange, SharePoint, all that, and it's all got to be hosted by us. And that's the way things have always been done. All right. Now, then what you'll find is as time went on, a company called VMware came out with a way of expanding on virtualization. Just so you know, virtualization is not a new term. Virtualization has been around for a very long time. In fact, the term hypervisor is essentially the software that lets us emulate hardware. And if you can emulate hardware, you can also store software on that emulated hardware. That's the idea of virtualization. That term hypervisor has been around since the 1970s. The idea of even mainframes dividing up processing time and doing shared computing was a form of virtualization. So this is not a new concept, but VMware, they expanded on this idea, and the thing that they did that really pushed the envelope on all this was that, hey, you don't necessarily need 4 different servers. And here's the other thing. Here's the other crazy thing. If you wanted redundancy for those 4 servers, you'd really need 8 servers, right? You could do clustering those together. So you'd have 8 servers to provide redundancy for those. But with virtualization, I can set up a hypervisor server, 1 server, and virtualize those other servers. Now, in the Microsoft world, we call that Hyper-V. That is the software that does this, Hyper-V, hypervisor. Microsoft's not the one that came up with that. VMware is not the first to ever come up with that. VMware was the biggest contributor to this concept, though, so I do have to give them credit where credit is due. All right, now the other beautiful thing, though, about this is you get a really, really powerful machine. You virtualize your machines on those. You get these things called checkpoints in Microsoft. They used to be called snapshots, and a lot of other companies still call them snapshots, where you can make changes without the worry of breaking anything because you can revert back to before the change was made. The other thing that's wonderful about using virtualization is if I want to have complete redundancy, I don't have to have 8 servers. I could literally, purchase another server and have a copy of the virtual machines on that other server. Now I've only got 2 servers as opposed to having to have a total of 8 servers. Okay, so this is a very powerful feature capability that kind of started everything. Another thing that we got, and this is kind of where you start thinking about cloud computing, is with virtualization comes the term elasticity, which basically means that each of these machines can be given a certain amount of RAM processing power, but here's what's interesting about that. If one of the servers isn't using all of the available RAM that it's been given, it can share it with other servers. So for example, this file server has been given more RAM than it needs, and then SQL needs that RAM. The file server can give up some of that RAM over to SQL, and when SQL's done using that extra memory, it can release it back to everybody It's basically a pool type scenario where it gets released into a pool of RAM and pool of CPU, and they can grow and shrink as they need. And that's a small way of sort of on-premise way of looking at elasticity. Of course, when you get into cloud computing, you'll learn that that can expand across multiple machines across the board in these big data centers, but not to get into that just yet here. But that's the idea. Hopefully that now helps you with understanding that concept of what virtualization is. And with that is really where, cloud computing started to come into play, which I'm not explaining in this video. But hopefully now you have a much better understanding of the concept of the RAS, VPN, as well the DMZ concepts and virtualization. And now in this next section we'll start getting into the concept of cloud services. Now, with the creation of virtualization, this got companies thinking, if we can emulate hardware, we can create these virtual machines, and we can store software on there. We can have operating systems running on that emulated hardware, the operating systems being called guest operating systems. We could technically host these virtual machines for companies for a price as a service. So the idea being, hey, you pay us a fee each month and we'll host your virtual servers, and you don't have to deal with all the headaches of hosting your own data center on premise, and the power that's needed to do that, and the air conditioning that's needed to do that, all the hardware that's needed to do that, as well as the knowledge of how all the hardware works. So this is essentially what a cloud company brings to the table. So various companies like Google and IBM and Microsoft and Apple and all these companies, a lot of them already had tons of data centers, these big massive warehouses all over the world that they could support it. Some of these companies, such as Microsoft and IBM and Amazon, and Amazon being one of the biggest and first, decided to open this up to the public for a fee and allow you to host your services in their data centers. So this is where cloud computing really comes into place. This big cloud here is going to represent cloud computing, mainly the Microsoft cloud computing. And of course, it's all connected to the internet with incredibly fast, high-speed internet connections, fiber connections, and all of that. So there's some terminology or some acronyms I want to talk a little bit about real fast here as we get into this. First off, in cloud computing, there is an acronym we call IaaS. That stands for Infrastructure as a Service. Okay? Infrastructure as a service means that a provider is hosting all of the hardware infrastructure for you, and then they are going to provide you with a way for you to interact with that hardware and utilize their hardware as a service. All right, and this, of course, is where Azure comes into play, Microsoft Azure. Now, you might pronounce that word different. People have different ways of saying Azure. Some people call it Azure. Some people call it Azure. Some people call it, I've even heard it called Azure before, Azure. There's various names for it. In fact, years ago when I was first learning Azure, I decided I wanted to make sure I was pronouncing this correctly. So I was like, I'm going to go to watch the developers. So I started watching videos of the developers, the people who created Azure, and I figured I would determine. The very first video I ever watched, the guy was pronouncing the word Azure, so that's how I say it. But what I further learned is that the Microsoft developers don't agree on how to say it either. Some of them say Azure, some of them call it Azure, some of them call it Azure. So anyway, tomato, tomato, pronounce it however you want to pronounce it, okay? But Azure is Microsoft's main IaaS system. What this is Microsoft is going to host, they've got all these data centers all over the world, and they're going to host their hardware so that you can host on top of their hardware your virtual machines or whatever it is. So you can host virtual machines. Microsoft will also allow you to have access to what are called virtual appliances, like virtual firewalls, also virtual load balancing software, because you can get access to what are called VNets, This is virtual networking, so you can create these virtual networks based on TCP/IP that are running your, in their cloud service with virtual machines on it, and then you can put a virtual firewall. So you can almost like recreate what you're seeing here in an on-premise environment. You can recreate that in the cloud. They also provide virtual storage, so you can store data and backup data out there. They support database hosting, all of that. That's all part of IaaS. Now with IaaS, the model for that, for the most part, is you pay for what you use. So there's an algorithm that looks at how much memory, how much processing power, how much storage that's being used, and then you get a fee each month for what you're using. The good news is they do have a calculator that kind of helps you forecast this. And you can even set alarms to let you know if you're approaching a certain budget that you've got on cost. There's a lot of things out there to help you do that. But that's the idea. You pay for what you use. Okay, now there is another couple of terms I want to mention as well. This next term is called Platform as a Service, and then there's a third term called Software as a Service. So Platform as a Service, PaaS, and Software as a Service. Platform as a Service and software. Let me explain software as a service first, because it's pretty easy to visualize, and then I'll explain platform as a service. So the idea of software as a service is basically they have applications that can be hosted in the cloud service, apps, if you will. These apps are 100% ready to use, ready for you to take advantage of. All you got to do is use those applications. Okay. For example, Microsoft has what's called Office for the web, or it used to be called Office Online. So that's like Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You can run it from within your web browser. All you got to do is just jump right in and use it. So from an admin standpoint, all we have to do is assign the users that are allowed to use that, and they can go use it, and it's available to them 100%. All they got to do is start using it. There's not really a lot of administration for us. Now, what is Platform as a Service? Well, Platform as a Service is a system in which the majority of the configuration is done for us, but we still have some admin configuration we have to do to use it. For example, with virtual machines, this is 100% IaaS. A virtual machine you can put whatever operating system on there, but you're responsible for the operating system. You're responsible for the software that goes on it. You as an admin have to manage all that. Okay. With Platform as a Service, virtual machines are set up in the background that you don't have any control over. They've already put the operating system on there. They've already put the software on there. You don't have any control over any of that. But there's still some administration you have to do in order to control it. For example, Microsoft has a directory service called Azure AD. Now, this is a big deal. This is probably one of the biggest deals of the things I've gone over so far in this cloud. Azure Active Directory is what we call a platform as a service. It is a directory service that is sort of the cloud version of what you have here called ADDS. So, now I remember when I first heard about Azure Active Directory, I thought, oh, well, this is just like you're just hosting virtual domain controllers in the cloud. No, they have completely redone the concepts of Active Directory. It is completely redone with all new web-based programming languages. It does not use any of the dated stuff like LDAP and Kerberos and all that. It uses industry standard authentication protocols in order to support all the latest and greatest features and capabilities in the cloud. Okay, and so these are where users, passwords, all of that stuff is going to be managed in the cloud. But it starts out with almost nothing in it. So it's ready to use, but you as an admin have to start creating users and all of that. Now you might say, well, wait a minute, what if I want to use my on-premise users in the cloud? Well, stand by, I'll explain that in a second. Anyway, Azure AD is a platform as a service. So is, here's another one, Exchange Online. Microsoft has Exchange Online. That is actually both a platform as a service and a software as a service, in that the admin side of it is the platform as a service, but the user side is the software as a service. Same thing for SharePoint Online. Microsoft has SharePoint online as well. Same idea there. All right. And then you've got Microsoft Teams. That's the admin side of that is a platform as a service, but the user side of that is a software as a service. There is OneDrive for Business. That's a cloud storage that we have access to that allows users to store their data out there in the cloud. There is a product called Intune, which is Microsoft's MDM product. MDM, it's also MAM product, so it's both. A mobile device management that allows us to manage devices. This is one of the most powerful things we have available to us. This is what sort of is replacing the concept of GPOs. This is going to allow us to manage our device settings. Not only can we manage on-premise devices, but we can manage mobile devices. GPOs can only manage devices for Windows. With Intune, we can manage Windows, Android, iOS, iPadOS, macOS, all that stuff. With the help of Intune, we can manage the settings and restrictions. We can deploy software. This is a very, very powerful product, okay, that we have available to us. It even has a thing called autopilot, which will allow us to reconfigure Windows machines and all of that. So very, very powerful stuff that we have available to us. All right. Now, I will tell you that Azure has, Azure definitely has some of the, it has some platform as a service technologies and some software as a services technologies, but the main type of system that Microsoft has created for platform as a service and software as a service is called Microsoft 365. Okay, Microsoft 365. All right, which I forgot to add to my display here. We actually do have apps that are called the Microsoft 365 apps. All right, which formerly they would call them Office 365 apps. They're now, starting to call them Microsoft 365 apps. But the Microsoft 365 services it is a cloud service that basically sits on top of Azure. So you have Azure in the background of all this, and the Microsoft 365 sitting on top of it. All right, you can't have a Microsoft 365 account or tenant that doesn't also have Azure. Azure is in the background no matter what. And the other thing to be aware of is both of these share Azure AD. So you'll notice that there are web portals for creating users and things through Microsoft 365 or creating users through Azure. It all ties back to Azure AD. You're going to see the same users no matter what. So these two things are glued together basically. Okay, they're glued together. Now on Microsoft 365 with PaaS and SaaS and all that, you're not really going to be hosting virtual machines, but you're going to be working with these services. Let's just kind of color code some of this real quick. All right. Now again, I do want to add that Azure does have PaaS and SaaS services that I'm not getting into right now, but it's mainly an IaaS based service. That's its main focus. Microsoft 365 is strictly PaaS related and software as a service, SaaS related. It doesn't really have any virtual machines or any of that, though it can interact with them. Okay, so if I was to sort of draw a circle around some of these, all of this stuff you see here would be Azure related, and then all of this stuff you see right here would be the Microsoft 365 related. Now, they both share Azure AD, so I'm going to put a purple circle around that. Red and blue make purple. All right, and so they all link to that. Okay, and so that is how Microsoft handles those concepts. The other thing about With Azure, you're paying for the CPU, RAM, storage you use. With Microsoft 365, it's all based on licenses. So you purchase these subscriptions that have a certain amount of licenses, and you issue these licenses out to your users, and your users can take advantage of these various features. Okay. One more thing I want to explain here, and that is, what about the issue of what if we want to use our on-premise users to access resources in Azure? Well, Microsoft has a solution for that. They actually have a type of server that you can set up, and the server is called an Azure AD Connect server. Azure AD Connect. Now, what does this do? An Azure AD Connect server, this is a synchronization-based system, and what it will do is it will allow my on-premise users to be synchronized out to Azure AD. Now, it does not allow Azure AD users to be synced in, only out, but it will allow user passwords and all of that to be synced in. So if a user is logging on to Azure AD and they change their password out in the cloud, it does have the ability to synchronize that password back in. But the beauty of this is by going this route, if you have this on-premise environment, you can achieve what we call SSO. What is SSO? Single sign-on. The idea of single sign-on with all of this is my user can sit down at their on-premise computer, they can log on, and it's going to log them on both in the cloud as well, it's going to log them on-premise as well as in the cloud at the same time. All right, and they can access resources out there. The other thing I'll tell you is that Microsoft has moved into a way to where you could technically not even have a domain nowadays. You don't necessarily have to have a domain. In fact, it pains me to say this as a consultant because, I have fed my family for, 2 decades by using Active Directory, both teaching it as well as, consulting on it. But I'll be honest, Microsoft is now moving in a direction to where domains are not even needed anymore. They're now making it possible to where everything can be managed through your cloud service and domains are not needed. But if you're a company that's already got a domain and all this is still in place and all of that, then this Azure AD Connect server is going to be the thing that's going to help you. Okay? All right. Well, hopefully this has now helped you have a better understanding. This was really just a fundamentals video to help you understand the cloud service, the concepts of it, and I hope that this has been helpful to you. Let's do an introduction of Teams. Now, if you actually just look at Microsoft's website on Teams, they walk through like what the point of Teams is, Microsoft Teams being their main messaging platform now. They tell you it's the hub of teamwork in Microsoft 365, chat from anywhere, meet from anywhere, call from anywhere, collaborate from anywhere. They've got some nice little videos on there that walk through things with you. Of course, that's what we're learning in this course. Now, one thing I want to show you is you can download the Team application right here off their website. You can click Download Teams. You can also open it up through the web portal. Let's go to portal.office.com. All right, and at that point, let me just sign in with my credentials here, and it's going to allow us to see the different apps that are available, and the one we care about right now is Teams. So we're going to go right here into Teams, and that's going to pop up the Teams web-based application. Now, it also gives you an opportunity to download the app here as well. You're going to get essentially the same experience for the most part. Although I am going to go through in the course with you the different browser support and the different apps and all that. Again, I'm just kind of introducing you. So here I am in Teams, and at that point I can set up what are called Teams and Teams channels, and I can see all the activity that's happened. I can see chat messages directly with other users, the different Teams and calendar option here. We're scheduling meetings. I got calls that have been set up. That's all stuff we're going to go over in the course, the different calls. Another thing is file sharing. We're going to talk about all of that. I've got all these apps available, so if I want to
set up an app here. I can click on, for example, stream. I can pin that. That's called pinning. So the app is available to me there. You can even set up bots that allow you to chat and get support and help. All right. So you got all these apps that are available to you. You can also go down here to where it says apps, and your company can actually purchase additional apps and make those available to you in Teams. Okay, so this is all just right here in the main Teams application itself. Now, another thing we're going to spend a lot of time on is the administration side of things. In other words, the behind the scenes, or the under the hood, if you will, of Teams. And we're going to be spending a lot of times on portal.microsoft.com. If we go there in our web browser, we can get to the Teams Admin Center by clicking on the left over here where it says Teams, or click Show All. You're going to hear me say that a lot in this course. I might sound like a broken record between videos because I like to always give sort of the starting point, because a lot of times what I've seen in other courses is instructors will go through and they'll show you how to get somewhere one time, and then, you know, hours into the course they revisit somewhere and then you don't remember how you got there. So I kind of repeat myself a lot and say, okay, you're going to start here on portal.microsoft.com, and then you're going to click Teams. Keep in mind, if Teams does not show up, you'll also hear me say this a lot, click Show All, because that's going to show all of your admin centers at that point. So that brings us into the Teams Admin Center, and this is going to be one of the main sort of under the hood areas that we're going to be talking about going down the line here with all these different options. Okay, so hopefully that gives you just kind of a quick introduction to what we're looking at, and again, we're going to be digging deep into all of this stuff as we go along in the course.
Now, when it comes to working with Microsoft Teams, one of the first things that most people are going to want to know as an admin is, well, how do we create a team? All right, and before I answer that question, I want to answer another question that gets asked a lot as well, which is, who can create teams? All right, well, actually, you're going to find that pretty much anyone that it's actually linked to Exchange Online. So if you have a license and you have a mailbox for Exchange Online, then you automatically have the ability to create what's called a Microsoft 365 group. And if you can automatically create a Microsoft 365 group, then you can automatically create a team. Of course, that follows up the next concern that people have. Well, what if I don't want users creating a team or a Microsoft 365 group? Well, then my suggestion would be to check out this article. If you do a Google search or a Bing search on manage who can create Microsoft 365 groups, this is going to help you with controlling all that. Now, the first question is this really the way Microsoft wants it? Do they really want just anybody to be able to create groups and teams? Well, by default, all users can create Microsoft 365 groups. This is the recommended approach because it allows users to start collaborating without requiring assistance from IT. If your business requires that you restrict who can create groups and also teams, you can restrict Microsoft 365 group creation to the members of a particular Microsoft 365 group or a security group. If you're concerned about user creating teams or groups that don't comply with your business standards, consider requiring users to complete a training course and then adding them to the group of allowed users. When you limit who can create a group, it affects all services that rely on group access, such as all these services here. Okay, so basically what they're telling you is, yes, you can restrict it. By default, it is not restricted. They don't really recommend that you restrict it, but you can. And if you want to restrict it, then you need to follow these steps. I'm not going to go through all the steps in this particular video. This is kind of outside the scope of what I'm going over, but I did want to point out this article to you. So if you are interested in learning how to restrict who can create groups and teams, you need to check this article out here, Manage Who Can Create Microsoft 365 Groups, and that's going to take care of business. All right, with that said, let's jump in and get to how we create a team. So we're going to jump back over here to portal.microsoft.com. We're going to start by taking a look at the Teams Admin Center method for creating a team. So we're going to click Show All right here on portal.microsoft.com. We're going to click Teams, and that's going to bring us into the Teams Admin Center. Okay. So once the Teams Admin Center gets loaded up on the screen here, we're going to look over to the left, and there's a drop-down blade called Teams. We're going to go ahead and click on that, and then we're going to click on Manage Teams. Now, the first thing I want to say is, do not look at my screen and be concerned over, well, I don't have the same, if you're doing any of this stuff with me, you may say, well, I don't have the same items as you do on your screen. That does not matter, okay? It does not matter. What you got to understand about this course is it's getting updated all the time. There's no way I can synchronize every little detail because things are constantly getting updated. I will tell you when something is important and when it's not important, and if you don't have the same teams as I have right here, it doesn't even matter, so don't even worry about it, okay? What I want to show you right now is how do we create a team from the Teams Admin Center. Well, we go right here to Add, and we give it a name, okay? So I can call this whatever I want. I'll call it Teams Admin Center Team, TAC Team, TAC Team, okay? This is just a demo for creating a team from the Teams Admin Center, okay? And then I can give it a team owner. Okay, the team owner is going to be the person that controls it, and then that'll be me. I'm going to say John Christopher, the person doing it. I'm not going to assign it any sensitivity label information, but that is something I could do if I wanted to. Granted, I'm not really getting into that right now. And then privacy, private or public. Well, what's the difference? They tell you private teams. These are teams that aren't open for everyone to join, and team owners can, of course, control who gets added to this. All right. But these aren't teams that are just available for other people to join. Then you've got what's called a public team, and these are teams that can be seen by everyone in the Teams app, but then they can join without getting an approval if they want. Okay, so that's the difference. Okay, so we can make this private or we can make it public. I'm going to make this one public, and then I'm going to hit Apply. All right, so just like that. Very easy, very straightforward. This is how we can create a team using the Teams Admin Center. All right, now that the team is created, you'll see it here in the list. I can select it by clicking on it if I want. I could also edit, archive, or delete it. Okay, if I want to edit it, I can click Edit. See that here. And then if I want to archive, I can archive it. Not really getting an archive in this video, but if I want to delete it, I can delete it right there. Okay, I can also click on the team, see some information about it, see that it has an email address associated with it, and who the owner is. Okay. Now I can also tell it to just go ahead and open in the Teams app if I want. Now ordinarily a user would get to Teams either by opening up the Teams app, right? Searching for it that way, or if you want to do the online version of Teams, you would just go to, I could go to portal.office.com or www.office.com or Microsoft365.com. There's various ways. Then click the little waffle symbol here. You can click Teams, or Teams also has a quick shortcut right here on the bar. So I can click that sidebar and go right into the online version of Teams that way. So, various ways I can get into the Teams, whether it be the online version of it or whether it be the app version of it. You can jump right into it. Okay. So you can clearly see once we get in here, if we go right here to, let's go to Teams, you will see that I might have to refresh my web browser in order to see this new team. Let me do that real fast. There it is. So there it is. The Teams TAC team is available. So very easy to jump right in and start using it. I've got that created. The other thing I want to show you is that if I go over to portal.microsoft.com, all right, and I drop down Teams and Groups and click on Active Teams and Groups, you should see that a group has been created. A Microsoft 365 group called TAC Teams team has been created. That's a group, and it's associated with the team. And by the way, you may not see the same groups as me if you're doing this stuff with me. Again, I know I sound like a broken record. You may not see the same exact things on your screen as me. All right, and that's due to the fact that this course is always being updated and made better as time goes on. Exam objectives change, and so I change the course and update the course. So there's, may see some different things here. That's not a big deal. The only thing we care about right now in this video is this one team. all right, as of right now. But let's jump back over here and let's talk about creating a team through Microsoft Teams as well. So how would a user, because normally a user is not going to go to the Team Admin Center, right? Because that's for admins. But if you're a user, how would you create a team if you wanted to? Okay, so if a user was working on a project, how would they create a team? We go to join or create a team right here, and then I can say, okay, well, I want to create a team. I can say create a team from scratch, create it from a group, select from a template. Not really getting into any of that right now. I'm just going to say create one from scratch. All right, and then notice that I can say, I can specify sensitivity. If we've got sensitivity, I can do a private or public, or you've even got what's called an org-wide through here. Everyone in the organization just automatically joins it, okay? But I'm going to create a private team. I'm going to call this Teams App Created Team, okay? We'll click Create, and it's now creating me a team. So just like that, you can see it's very painless, very easy to create a Teams through the Teams app, or even through the portal in this case. Now from there, if I wanted to start adding team members to this, I could. So it tells you to start typing a name, distribution list, or security group to add to your team. You can also add people outside your organization as guests by typing their email address. Okay, so that's how I would do that. I could start typing names and click add, but I'm going to hit skip that. And there we go. We've now got this second team that's been created. All right, so very straightforward as far as creating a team that way as well. All right, so the third way I want to show you how we could create a team is from PowerShell. Okay, as an admin, and you might have seen something like this before, but I want to show you real fast how we can do that through PowerShell. So what I'll need to do on my operating system is get to PowerShell, and I'll just hit start on my operating system, Windows operating system, and just start typing the word PowerShell, and then I'm going to right click and say run as administrator, and that's going to bring me into PowerShell. So here I am. Now the first thing I want to address with PowerShell is people will ask the question, why? Why would we care about learning how to create a team with PowerShell? Because it is more complicated than just doing it graphically. The short answer to that, if you've never heard me say this before, the short answer to that is because we can automate things with PowerShell. If you are needing to perform a lot of actions against a bunch of teams, or even a single action for that matter to a bunch of teams, doing that through PowerShell is going to make life a lot easier. Okay, let's say you had 100 teams and you needed to modify something about all 100 teams. Going through and clicking each team through the graphical tools and having to modify whatever this attribute is would be a nightmare. But with PowerShell, I can automate that. Now, you're not going to learn how to be a PowerShell expert in this course, but you are going to learn some of the commands here. And if you take the time to learn a little bit about PowerShell scripting, you could really improve your performance as an admin and being able to perform things. All right, you don't really have to be a PowerShell expert for what we're learning here, though. All right, so let's jump into it. Now, the first thing I want to show you, if you've never done this or never seen this, and again, you may have already seen this, but if you haven't, the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to set what's called the execution policy on our machine, because we cannot run scripts in PowerShell unless we do that. So there's a command called set-execution policy we'll say execution policy will be set to unrestricted. Okay, so I'm going to say yes to that, and now we're good to go on that. The next thing I need to do is I need to install the module, which is a group of commands that allow us to do things in Teams. And the command for that is install-module-name, and then the name is called Microsoft Teams. All right, so if we've never installed something called NuGet, it's going to ask permission to install something called NuGet. I would hit yes to that, and I would hit enter. Of course, I have installed NuGet before, so I can do that. And by the way, if you ever run this command and you want to make sure that you have the latest version and that it overrides an older version, you can put /force/allow clobber, and that will make sure that it overwrites an older version. If you've done this before, maybe you had an older version of the commands and you want to re-download the newest version, make sure you got the latest version of all of the team's commands. That's going to be the command that's going to do that. Okay. So at that point, we will have the commands for Teams. So the next thing is we have to connect to Microsoft Teams. We can do that by typing connect dash Microsoft Teams. We'll hit enter, and that's going to connect. It's going to basically allow me to authenticate. So it's going to eventually let me sign in using my credentials here. So I'll do that. And as long as I don't get an error message, which I didn't, I'm good to go. So I'm now officially signed into Teams. So now I can type get dash command. That means show all the commands, but let's filter it. We'll say dash noun, and let's filter it by the word team. So here's all the Teams commands. And if we scroll up, we can see there is a command called get team. If I want to see what teams I've got, I can type get team. Hit enter, and it's going to go and show me here's all the teams that I currently have. Now, if I want to create a new team, all right, I can do that. I can do that by simply typing new dash team. All right, let's give it a display name. Let's call this PowerShell created team. Okay, I can give it a description if I want. This team was created through PowerShell. All right, and then let's make this. Let's say visibility is it's going to be a public team. So let's hit enter and see if it got created. All right, and there it is. It did show up. You'll notice that I did hit enter a couple of times here just to make sure that it wasn't pausing on the screen. Sometimes when you run things in PowerShell, it'll kind of just pause the screen. You'll have to hit enter or something to get it moving again, and that's why I did that. But it looks like it created the team. So if I type get dash team, we should see that that team is listed. All right, and there it is. Actually, let's jump over. Let's minimize this and go back over. And there is our team that's been created in Microsoft Teams. We go back over to the Teams Admin Center. All right, let's go back to the Teams Admin Center. We should see it is. Let's refresh the screen here. We should see that it appears there as well. So there you go. So that is how we would create a team through PowerShell. If I jump back into PowerShell, and let's hit the up arrow a few times and view the commands again. All right. There is a command called remove dash team if we wanted to remove a team. Okay. But let's go ahead and now that I've done that, I've shown you how to create a team those 3 different ways. We no longer really are going to need these teams, so I'm actually going to delete each one of the teams. Okay. So I'll just go right here in the Teams Admin Center, and we are going to remove this particular team. Actually, I didn't mean to go there, so let's go back over to Manage Teams. Now let's select the team that we want to get rid of. All right, and we're going to click delete. Click delete here, and just like that, we've deleted the team. So we no longer need those teams. I just wanted to show you how to create a team through this tool. All right, now we've created the team. If we go over to portal.microsoft.com, let's refresh the screen here. Drop down Teams and Groups, click on Active Teams and Groups. All right, you will see that when we deleted the teams, it also deleted the groups. So we don't have to go through here and do that separately. All right. All right, well, hopefully this video has helped you now understand the various ways we can create teams using the Teams Admin Center, the Teams app itself, as well as PowerShell. And I want to show you some other ways we can create teams. The first method I want to show you is how we can create a team from an existing Microsoft 365 group. We'll then take a look at how we can create a team from an existing team, and then finally how we can work with teams related to SharePoint Online. So we'll start out here on portal.microsoft.com. We're going to go to the little teams and groups drop down. We're going to click active teams and groups. We're going to click to add a group. By the way, it doesn't matter if you do not see the same groups as me if you're doing this with me. Don't even worry about that. We're going to click add a group though, Microsoft 365 group. We're going to click that. We're going to call this team from group demo. That'll be the name of this group. We'll click next. We'll assign an owner, and I'm going to assign myself as the owner. Does not matter if you don't have the same users as me either, by the way, if you're doing this with me. If you're not doing it with me, that's okay too. I'm going to assign myself as a member also. So I'm going to hit add, next, and we'll just say team from group demo, be the email address. We'll make it a private team. And so here is where it asks me if I want to go ahead and create a team. So in the real world, I probably would want to, right? But maybe this is a group that's already been created earlier in the company and it did not have a team associated with it, and we would want to add a team later. So that's the idea. We're going to kind of simulate there already being a group here that doesn't have a team, and then we're going to attach a team to it. So we're going to click next and click to create the group, and the group has now been created. So now let's jump into portal.office.com. So we'll pretend like we're a user. All right, and we'll bring up Teams. Of course, you could also do this from the Teams app installed on your computer as well, or whatever device. Okay, so we're opening up the Teams utility here. You may not see the same Teams as me, and if you don't, that's fine. I'm going to click Join and create a team. And we're going to click to create a team from group or team. So we'll click that. We're going to choose the second option, which is to create a team from an existing Microsoft 365 group. We're going to select this group right here we just created, team from group demo, and we're going to click to create. And just like that, we've essentially now created a team from an existing Microsoft 365 group. So you can see how easy and painless that is. Well, it's even less painful to create a team from a team. Watch this. So we'll click to join or create a team, create team, and we'll choose from a group or team. We're going to choose to create a team from a team. So we'll choose this one right here, team from group. We're going to call this team from team demo. All right. And we give it a description, specify if we want it to be private or public, which information is going to be copied over from the original. We'll say channels, tabs, team settings, apps, as well as members. We'll click create, and it's now creating a team from a team. So another thing that's very, very painless. All right. Now let's see how we could create a team from a SharePoint site. All right. So what we'll do, we'll go over here to portal.microsoft.com. Going to click the show all ellipse symbol here, and we're going to go to SharePoint Online. So here is SharePoint. That's going to bring us into the SharePoint Admin Center. We'll click on Active Sites, and this is where our SharePoint sites would be. And don't worry if you don't see the same sites as me. If you're doing any of this with me, please ignore these for right now because they don't even matter. Okay. So I'm going to click to create. Now, what kind of SharePoint site is this? Is it going to be a team-based site, create private space to collaborate with your team, or a communication site? I'm going to choose team site. I'm going to call this Team from SharePoint. Let me give it a better name. Team from SharePoint Demo. Okay. And then from there, I'll specify myself as the owner. All right, and I'll click next. I could add members if I want. I'll add myself as a member, and I'm going to click finish. So we created the SharePoint site. Now, if we jump back over here from into Teams and we refresh, you're going to notice that it is not added. That's because it doesn't just automatically create a team from SharePoint, even if you choose that option. So I could click to join and create a team, create an existing team from a group, choose a 365 group, and look at there it is. So team from SharePoint, I can now add a team from that SharePoint site. And that's how we can do that. So there's a little extra step there to do it involving SharePoint, but as you can see, very easy to perform. Okay, I no longer need those teams. I just wanted to show you how to do that. So I am actually going to delete those teams. So we'll hit delete team. Hit the little ellipse symbol and delete the team, which is also they do warn you about it's deleting the group as well. And there we go. One thing to be advised about when you are deleting a team like that, if we go back into SharePoint and we refresh, all right, you will see that it's still there. So it doesn't just delete SharePoint data like that. If you want to delete SharePoint data, you can go and tell it to delete. The site belongs to a group, deleting SharePoint, so we can tell it to wipe out that data that we don't want. By the way, when you do this, it can still take some time before it actually goes away. So even when you come back in here, sometimes if you do a refresh, it'll show back up. That's just been my experience, but this time it looks like it's cleaned it pretty well, but sometimes it'll show back up. All right, well, there you go. Those are some of the non-common ways for creating a team. I'd now like to show you how we can create teams from Teams templates. So let's take a look at that. Here we are on portal.office.com, or you can also say Microsoft365.com. And we're going to go right here to Teams. That's going to bring us into the actual Teams apps. Now, you could, of course, install the Teams app on your computer as well, or do it through the portal like I'm doing here. Now what we'll do is we'll come down here where it says Join or Create a Team. We'll say Create a Team, and then you'll notice we have Select a Template. So the idea of a template, this is a neat feature that we have, and this is ever changing, so don't be surprised if you see some different templates on your end than mine, because they seem like they're adding a bunch of these all the time and making changes to the existing ones all the time. But this is going to let me create a team that is going to fill some kind of a need of a group of people at your company, and assist them with whatever that need is. For example, let's say that I am working with maybe it's HR department or something, and they're onboarding employees. I can create a team based on that, or maybe help desk or incident response, crisis communications, patients care, bank branch. So you'll see a bunch of stuff here. Let's go with onboard employees. So when you choose that, when you go to onboard employees, it's going to create these channels automatically. General announcements, employee chat, training, and then it's going to add apps that will assist with this, like in this case, bulletins, employee ideas, list, onboard checklist, milestones, Power Automate. So all this stuff is going to be added. So we'll click Next. Okay, we can choose, we're going to have sensitivity, which I'm not going to do. I can choose private or public. This is going to be private, and then I can give it a name. Okay, so whatever I want to call it, onboard template demo is what I'll call it. Then I can drop down where it says customize channel. You'll see the if I want to rename any of these, I can. Once I'm done with that though, I can click to create, and it's now going to create the team based on that template. All right, from there I'll hit close, and here it is right here. So when I click on this and I click on one of the channels, you'll notice that the apps and all that were available will automatically show up here. I've got a onboard checklist here I can click on. It makes all this available to me. All right, I can click new there, new item, and go from there if I wanted to use checklist. So I've got Power Apps that are integrated with this. Power Automate, not really getting into all that right now. The point though that I'm trying to make with the template is a template can be utilized to create a team, and it can go ahead and just integrate certain applications and things like that might be needed for to be used by that team for whatever job that team is going to be providing. Okay, so that is the idea of using a template to create a team. So inside of Microsoft Teams, I can create a team from a template, just like I did right here, this one here called Onboard Template Demo. And I did that by, of course, clicking to join, create a team, and then I created it based on these templates, right? That one right there. Now, here's the thing, though. how do we manage those templates? How do we create those templates? Those templates that you see here are templates that were just pre-created for me, but if I wanted to create my own templates, I can. So I want to show you how we can do that. Let's jump over to portal.microsoft.com. I'm going to click the Show All ellipse symbol, and we're going to go down and click Teams. This is going to bring us into the Teams Admin Center. And this, of course, is where, if I want, I can create templates, I could edit existing templates, remove templates, and all that fun stuff. So we'll go right here and drop down where it says Teams, and we have the blade here called Team Templates. So we're going to click on that. And here are the existing templates that are available to us. All right, these are the ones that have been pre-created. Now, if I want, let's just create one. I'm going to click Add, and it does give me a warning. This is the first time I've ever created a template. It does take a little longer. So I can say create a new template, use an existing team template as a template, or start with an existing template. So I'm going to say create a new one, and then I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it My Template Demo. All right. All right, and then from there, if I could actually spell, that would be great. From there, give it a short description. Created for demo purposes, and then we'll say right here, we'll say this is a template I am creating for a demo. So this is a long description. Okay, from there I could choose locale, and then I'll click next. So after I've done that, I can start adding channels. So if I want, I'll just name these channels whatever I want. Channel 1, and I'll create one called Channel 2. Whatever I want to call these channels, right? Oops, didn't mean to do that. Let's click the right one this time. So, if you're working on some kind of a project and this or this was a project-based template, you could have channels that were named based on general names for what projects might be running. You could do that. I'm just giving it a general name, Channel 1, Channel 2, and then I could add apps if I want to, search for apps here. That are available to me. All right, I can do that. Whatever apps Microsoft has made available, I'll just start with letter P here. And if we want to throw in like Power Automate actions, I could do that, right? So whatever apps I want to throw in there, that is something that I can do, okay? And then I'm not going to put any apps in right now, but we're going to go ahead and hit Submit. And this is going to go ahead and create our template for us, which didn't take too long. Now I want to jump over here where it says template policies. Let's take a look at those. And they tell you here that Teams template policies let you create and set up policies that control what templates people in your organization can see. You can use the global policy and customize or create custom policies. So if we see there's a global org-wide default policy, we can click on. Right? And we can see which templates are available right here. We have this My Template Demo, which I created, right? That's there. And then also, if we want, we can add a policy. So we could say, well, we'll add a policy. We could specify, maybe this policy is going to be for, let's say, salespeople or something, sales users. Then we might give them these specific policies that would be available. Let's see, maybe that one and that one. That'll be fine. And then we would hit Save, right? And that's how we would create it. If we wanted to assign that, we'd go right here, click it, go to Manage Users, and then specify the users that we want to assign this to. Okay. So pretty straightforward on how that would work, right? But that is basically the concept of working with a template policy, as well as working with the org-wide default policy. All right, now I want to tell you the disappointing part about creating templates with Teams, and that is that it can take up to 24 hours from when you create a template to where it shows up in Teams. So when you do this, if you jump over to the Teams app and you click Join Create Team and come in here, you're going to be a little bit saddened to see that your new template's not available yet. Okay. If you look at Microsoft's document, they even talk about this. Create a custom template. Somewhere on this page they tell you this. There it is. It can take up to 24 hours for Teams users to see a custom template change in the gallery. So it could take up to 24 hours before it starts showing up in this gallery of available templates. So just be advised on that. Once that's done, though, at that point you'll be able to start creating teams from templates. I'd now like to talk about managing the membership of a Microsoft team. Now, if you think about it, the starting point for managing the membership of a team is going to basically be involve the creation of the team, right? So that's kind of the starting point. So let's take a look at that first. All right. So here we are on portal.microsoft.com, and we know that one way we can create a team is by going to Teams and Groups, clicking Active Teams and Groups, and creating a Microsoft 365 group right here. Give it a name. All right. Assign an owner, and then from there you assign membership, right here. So that's the first method, right, for dealing with it. Another option, let's just cancel out of that. Another would, of course, be to go through the Teams Admin Center. So I'll go to Show All. I'll go down here to Teams. That's going to bring us into the Teams Admin Center. Okay. And we'll drop down where it says Teams, and we'll click Manage Teams. And we would click Add to add a team, right? I'm just going to call this Team Test. All right, we'll just call it Team Test. And we would specify owner. We would specify sensitivity, all that, if we wanted to. And we'd specify if it was public or private. And we would hit Apply, right? And then from there, once that's created, let's go ahead and just let that get created. So we'll create a team called Team Test. All right, just something to kind of play around with a little bit. All right, and once that's done, you'll see I can see the team right here. I can click it, and members currently is just John Christopher. I'm going to click Add, and I've got a user called Tom Williamson that I've created. I've given him he has a Teams license. So, and just to kind of clarify where I'm going with that, if I go back over to portal.microsoft.com, I drop this down, click Active Users. All I got to do to create a username Tom Williamson is just create this, add a user, which I've already done, and then assign him a license. Now, you may not see the same users as me, so don't worry about not having the same users as me. If you want to create a user that does like what Tom Williamson does, you can. I just created a user named Tom Williamson, and I assigned a license to that user. Okay, that's all I've done. All right, nothing special, but you can see that Tom Williamson now is a member of that team. On the flip side, if I wanted to remove him out of that, I could do that, simply remove him. Okay, so there you go. We've created our team. We did it this time. We did it through Teams Admin Center. So that's another way you can manage membership of a team. And then if we go back over here to the portal.office.com and click on Teams, which is what I've done here, you'll see there it is. There's the team test, and I can click that and say Manage Team, or I could add a member if I wanted to. But I'll go to the Manage Team, and right here, Members and Guests. Let's just refresh our browser because it sometimes takes a little while. All right. And if we want to, we can also we could log on as that user, so we can see if that user actually has access to the team, which he should, right? Yeah, so it's still not showing. But let's I'm going to go and open up in private mode here, and I'm going to go to portal.office.com. We're going to sign on as Tom Williamson at examlabpractice.com. All right, so it's signing on. And let's open up Teams as that user. All right, and as you can clearly see, the user does have access to the team. Let's jump back over to the admin account, though. Here we are on the admin account, and after refreshing the browser, and it did take a moment before it showed up, but you can see it now says members and guest is set to 1. So that user is officially a member, right? And so looking at the user, let's just expand that out a little bit. All right, there's the user, right? And if I wanted to, you'll notice here we can just remove him just like that. I can just hit X and remove the user. So adding and removing users to a team like that, very easy to do it through the app, very easy to do it through the Teams Admin Center. Okay, pretty quick, pretty easy. Microsoft doesn't really make it all that difficult to do that. Okay. Now, another way, of course, that we can add, remove team members in Microsoft Teams is with PowerShell. And if you were to go to Google or Bing and just search for these keywords, PowerShell add team member, you'll come across this command here, add-team user. You can go to that little article, and they've even got a example of what you would type in order to do it. Of course, in order to do that, when you specify the team, they do require you to enter a group ID for the team. So you'd actually have to type get-team first, and then it would display the group ID of each team. So it's a little bit of a pain in the butt just because they want you to use that group ID parameter with it. If you wanted to remove a team member, you can search for these keywords, PowerShell remove team member. You have a command called remove-team user. It pretty much works the same way. Remove, team user, specify the group ID, which is the team ID. Again, you can do that in PowerShell by typing get-team, and it'll tell you all the team group IDs, and we just copy it and put it in that spot. All right, but anyway, that is how we could very easily add or remove team users using PowerShell. So those are some of the various ways that we can manage membership of a team. Let's talk about user roles in Microsoft Teams. Now, when I say user roles, I'm talking about user roles and not admin roles, all right? And there's really only two kinds of roles that a user can be, and that is an owner and a member, although a user could be classified as a guest. Let me show you what I mean. So here I am on portal.microsoft.com. I'm going to click Show All, and we're going to click Teams. That's going to bring us into the Teams Admin Center. All right, once we get into the Teams Admin Center, we're going to be looking over here to the left. We're going to click on the Teams drop-down and click on Manage Teams. From there, I would click on any team that I've got I want to play around with. I could create one. I've recently created one called Team Test. I can click on that if I want. And again, it does not matter if you have the same teams as me. You can always create a team if you want. I've got these two users that are members. You can see that John Christopher is the owner. And then I have Tom Williamson, who is just a member. You can drop down role and see that right here. So what's the difference? Microsoft has a little article here that if you wanted to look at it, you can just search for team, owner, member, and guest capabilities in Teams, and you can find this article. But it tells you that owners, these are users who can manage certain aspects of a team. They can add and remove members, guests, change team settings, handle administrative tasks. There can be multiple owners. Members are people in the team, right? They talk with other team members and have conversations and upload and change files and all that fun stuff. And then guests are people from outside the organization that a team owner invites, such as partners and consultants and all that. And they've even got this nice little table it tells you what you can and can't do. So you can see the owner here can create channels and participate in private chat, and pretty much all of them can. Now, sharing files, owners and members can do that. Add apps, they can be invited. Well, that's a guest, right? Can create teams, owners and members can do that. Delete or edit posted messages, all three. And then as far as some of the more higher end features and capabilities, only the owner can do these features you see here. Okay. So things like add or remove members and guests, edit or delete a team, set team permissions, change the team picture, add guest to a team, auto show channels, control at mentions, allow at channel or at mentions, allow usage of emojis and GIFs or GIFs, however you like to say it, and memes, renew a team, archive, and restore team. Those are all owner capabilities, all right? So anyway, those are your user roles, and that is how you can manage user roles from the Teams Admin Center. Let's now take a look at just how quick and easy it is to manage teams using the Teams Admin Center. Now, some of this you might have already seen, but I just want to kind of put it all into this one video here. Here I am on portal.microsoft.com. I'm going to click the Show All Ellipse symbol. We're going to click Teams. That's going to bring us into the Teams Admin Center. So this is how you get into the Teams Admin Center, is from portal.microsoft.com. You can also go to admin.teams.microsoft.com and go straight in there if you want. So once we are in the Teams Admin Center, we can click Teams and look on Manage Teams, and this of course is where we would manage teams at. Don't worry if you don't have the same teams as me, okay? So as you can see, this is where I could go to add a new team if I want, click Add, give it a name, fill out all this information, and away we go. I can edit an existing team here, so I click the little team I want to edit, click to edit that team, and then from there I can go in and change some of the different settings you see here. Here is items like member permissions I can edit, all right, and including things like edit sent messages, allow that to happen. Team owners can delete sent messages, add edit channels, add edit private channels, delete channels. These are all things I can turn on and turn off if I want. I got mention settings I can turn on and off if I want. And then guest permission settings, so guests can add and edit channels. We don't allow that, as you can see. If I wanted to turn that on, I could. Right? And then fun settings will involve things like Giphy or Jiffy, however you like to say it. Stickers and memes and custom memes. So these are some of the things I can add or remove, take to the team. I got archive a team. I'm not really getting into that right now, but you can archive a team here. You can delete a team right here. All right, and then if you get into renewing teams, that's getting into kind of the archiving thing. I'm not really going to talk about that right now. All right. So let's go ahead and I'm going to delete this team test. I no longer need it. So there you go. Very easy to delete. Very easy to also modify a team by clicking on a team and adding memberships to teams. In fact, why don't we do this? Let's. I went ahead and deleted that team, right? So we've got rid of that team. Let's create another team called Manage Teams Demo, right? We'll apply to create the team. Let that get created real quick. Now, once a team is created, right, it's going to create the Microsoft 365 group with it as well. It does take a moment. I'll go to the team now, and right here's where, of course, I can add members, remove members. I can go to channels and I can create channels. So I can add a new channel if I want right here. Not really diving deep into channels in this video though. And then I've got my settings that are associated with it here, which of course I can if I want to modify those settings, all I got to do is edit it. Okay, so that's how that's going to work. All right. So all in all, hopefully you can see it's very easy to manage, modify teams using the Teams Admin Center. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this team that I just created. All right, so pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Hopefully that is something you can jump in and give a shot if you've never done it before. Let's now take a look at what some of the Teams environment settings are in the Teams Admin Center. So here we are on portal.microsoft.com. We're going to click the Show All Ellipse symbol and go down here to Teams. That's going to bring us into the Teams Admin Center. All right, now these Teams environment settings are going to configure these various settings that each team can utilize. So let me show you where that's at. Here we are on the Teams Admin Center, we're going to drop down Teams, and we're going to go to Teams Settings, all right? So right here, it tells you the first thing we got is notification and feeds. It says manage the way the Teams handles suggested and trending feeds. Suggested feeds can appear in a user's activity feed. So those suggested feeds that can be thrown up on the screen, they will appear in the user's activity field. Tagging, they tell you can control how tags are used across your organization. Tags can be added to one or multiple team members and used in @mentions by anyone on the team to notify people who are assigned that tag conversation. So who can manage tags? Right now it's just team owners, but you can see you can change it to owners and members or just turn it on, not enabled altogether. Team owners can change who can manage tags. That's turned on. Suggested tags. So you'll notice that we can do that. It says add tag names that will be suggested when somebody creates a tag. You can have a maximum of 25 tags, and each tag contain a maximum of 25 characters. You can have custom tags supported as well, and then they also tell you that Shift's app can also apply tags. So if you, it tells you that when this is on, tags are automatically assigned to people who are on shift based on their schedule and group name and shifts. Email integration. So this is turned on. Users can send emails to a channel and it appear in the channel. Okay. You can accept email channel from these SMTP domains. You could add a domain name there if you want, or multiple if you want. As far as sharing files, currently we support Citrix files, Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, and the Ignite. So these are all accepted as far as file stores and sharing options available. For organization, it says let users see others in the organizational hierarchy. Right now that is allowed, so show organization tab for users. And then for devices, you can control resource account behavior for Surface Hub devices that attend team meetings. So require a secondary form of authentication. Currently that's set to no access. We can do partial if we want. And this is, of course, they do, warn you that this is really just a Skype for Business feature. Set content PIN number. You can turn that on for Skype for Business. Surface Hub accounts can send emails as well if we want to do that. So that's what that is. Now, this is one of these features that's being changed and deprecated as time goes on. Search by name. So scope directory search controls how users can find and communicate with other people in their organization. So scope directory search uses using exchange address book policy. Currently that's turned off. So if you want to allow users to only be able to find each other based on what's called an exchange address book policy, you can. I'm not going to dive deep into exchange address book policies here, but basically what you can do there is you can control to where certain users can only find other users if you want. Last thing, safety and communication. So they tell you role-based chat permissions. Control the amount of supervision a user needs while chatting with others. Before you turn this on, turn on chat and assign chat permission roles to a user. So you can turn this on if you want. That is a feature that can be turned on. Once you've done that, you can hit save, and at that point you've now saved the Teams environment settings. All right. So hopefully that now helps you understand those. Again, this is a screen that changes very often, so just be advised your screen could look a little different no matter how frequently I update my videos. They do, update these screens pretty often. Let's take a quick look at the privacy and sensitivity settings that we have available in Microsoft Teams. So here we are on portal.microsoft.com. We're going to click the show all ellipse symbol and go to Teams. That's going to bring us into the Teams Admin Center. All right, once we get into the Teams Admin Center, we'll go right here to the Teams drop down and click Manage Teams. And then let's go here and click to add a new team. Okay, and I'll just call this example team. Specify my owner. Really what I want to look at is these two features right here. First, we've got the sensitivity. And they tell you here that with sensitivity, you have confidential info, confidential group, and you may not have the same sensitivity as me. You have to start creating sensitivity labels, and I'm not going to dive too deep into that, but in a nutshell, what that's going to involve is the fact that I can create what's called sensitivity labels, and the team itself can be flagged under a certain sensitivity label. With the help of that, we can prevent certain types of information from appearing inside the team. We can also prevent people from being able to communicate about certain topics based on certain keywords. We can be alerted if they do. That's one of the benefits of sensitivity. Again, the point of this video, we're not digging deep into creating sensitivity labels or any of that. I just wanted to explain what that is. So that's the idea there. Okay. Right now this will be set to none, and again, you have to create sensitivity labels and all that before you'll have these options. So don't worry if you don't have the same options as me. Lastly, we have privacy. Very simple. You'll have two options there. Private, teams aren't open for everybody to join. Basically, the owner can specify who's going to be a member of that, right? These private teams are not going to show up in search results. A person would have to invite you based on being an owner. And then public, anyone can join a public team. So these teams are seen by everyone. In the gallery, people can join the team without having to be approved. So those are your two privacy options. All right. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an understanding of sensitivity and privacy. I know that's not really a deep understanding of sensitivity, but you have to kind of get into sensitivity labels before you're really going to understand what the sensitivity options is. But hopefully that now helps you understand these two capabilities. I don't want to spend some time helping you understand channels in Microsoft Teams and the main types of channels we have. First off, what is a channel? What are we using channels for in Microsoft Teams? I guess is the first thing we would want to ask, right? So the idea here is that in order for somebody to take part in a team, or a group of people to take part in a team, maybe they're working on a project where they're part of the same department, and they basically want to use Teams for communications in most cases, right? So a channel is going to be a place for a team to share information, share messages, chat. They can interact with tools, they can share files, and so a channel is essentially going to help you with organization. It's going to be organized by a group or a project or some kind of a feature, or depending upon your company, something that's relevant to your company or something that's relevant to your organization. Your actual team members themselves, they can adjust certain things such as limitations, and they can control notifications and what can go in those channels. They can be private, they can be shared. So there's various ways that can be managed. In fact, I'm going to talk about that in these next few slides. The other thing would be that when you think about channels, it's essentially sort of like with your communication threads. This is going to allow you to focus and basically organize your conversations within your channels. All right, so you'll have threads to help you with this. All right, so let's talk about the various types of channels. The first one is called a standard channel, and a standard channel is pretty much open to everybody that's on the team. These are going to be your default types of channels. Okay, so when a channel gets created in a team, it's going to be a standard channel by default. All team members can take part in that. All right. The other thing is that org owners, so your org owners can change permissions, and they can also limit channel creation and permissions to certain roles. So they can control, who can go through the process of creating these and controlling the channels. You cannot convert a standard channel to a private channel or vice versa. What's a private channel? Okay, so private channels are going to be for, private discussions, right? These are going to be discussions that probably shouldn't be open to everybody on the team. And in order for somebody to take part in a private channel, they must be invited to join that channel. Okay, so by default, any team member or owner can actually create a private channel. So you don't have to be an owner. You can be just a standard member to create a private channel. Guest cannot create these channels, and that's something that I'd want you to remember on this. Your admin can, of course, alter these permissions and limit what can happen on a private channel for certain roles in the team. You also, again, cannot convert private channels to standard channels. Okay, so when that's created, it's gonna, it's permanently going to be considered a private channel. Okay, it is going to be linked to its parent team, and it can't be moved to a different team. Now, the last type of channel that we have available is called a shared channel. All right, so these are for collaborating with people inside and outside your organization. So not just people within the organization, but also people outside the organization. Only team owners can create a shared channel, and only shared channel owners can add members or share the channel with the team. Okay, only people who are owners or members of a shared channel can access it. So you got to be invited, in other words, if you want to join it. Another thing is, just like the others, you can't convert a shared channel into a standard or a private channel. Okay, so just keep that in mind. There's no conversions there. All right. All right. Well, hopefully that helps you now understand the different channel types. Pretty straightforward in understanding those, but just make sure you're aware of the facts that I just went over. Let's take a look now in Microsoft Teams at how we can work with channels. All right. So here I am on portal.microsoft.com. We'll first take a look at how we can work with channels in the Teams Admin Center. So we're just going to go and click on the show ellipse symbol here, scroll down, and go to the Teams Admin Center. Okay, so this will bring us into the Teams Admin Center. And then what we're going to do, once we get in here, we're going to go ahead and just create a team to kind of play around with, and from there we will create a channel. Okay. So here we go on the little Teams drop down. We're going to click on Manage Teams, and we're going to add a team. I'm going to call this the Channel Demo Team. All right. And at that point, I could select an owner and all that, sensitivity, privacy, private or public. I'll just make this owner public. I'm going to hit Apply. All right. And that is going to create me a team, right? Once that team gets created, you'll also see that from this interface, from the Teams Admin Center, we are going to be able to create channels as well. So we're going to go right here and click on the Channel Demo Team we've just created. All right, and we're going to click Channels. And of course, we do have the General Channel, right? That's just there pretty much in all teams. Anybody can take part in that. That's part of the team. But I'm going to go ahead and go to Channels. We're going to add a channel, okay? And from there, we're going to call this Standard Channel. All right. And it'll be a standard channel, obviously. We'll hit Apply. Okay, very easy, very simple. Now, let's jump over to Teams and see what that looks like over in Teams. So we're going to go over to portal.office.com. I'm just going to open it up through the web interface. So there is, we'll click on Teams. It's going to bring us into the web interface version of the Teams app. All right. So once this gets up, we should be able to see this team. It should have already loaded for us, and it has. There it is right there. All right. So it is showing up. So everything looks good there. And there is the shared channel. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a private channel. So we'll go here. We're going to add a channel. So this time we're going to do it through the app. We'll call this Private Channel. And we're going to select Private. And we're going to click to create. Okay. So now you want to add members. Well, what happens if I try to add myself? Well, I'm already added, right? Because I've created it. So I don't have to add myself. All right. But there's a private channel. Now let's do this. I'm going to go and open up an in private window here. So private browser. And I'm going to go to portal.office.com. I'm going to log on as my user, Tom Williamson, who also has a license for Teams. Okay. And if you are doing any of this with me, you would just need a user that has a license. Okay. Doesn't matter. You don't have to use the same usernames as me unless you just want to. Okay. So I'm going to log on as Tom Williamson. Okay. And open up Teams. and we're going to take a look and see what Tom Williamson, who is obviously not the user that created the team, I created it as John Christopher. All right, so we're going to see what this user will be able to see once they get jumped in, once they jump in here. Okay, so slowly but surely it's loading up. All right, and what can we see? So right out of the gates here, you will see that this user sees these two teams. So let's click join or create a team. All right, and you'll see that I've got this team right here that I can join because it's a public team, right? I made it public, I didn't make it private. So the user doesn't see it over here yet, but the user will see it here. By the way, it does not matter if you don't have the same teams as me over here. I'm going to click join team, and I've now joined the team. All right, from there it says you have, let's refresh. Might have glitched out on us a little bit there. All right. There it is. All right, and it does say there is one hidden channel that I can't see. So the user can't see the hidden channel that's there, which is tells you it's a standard channel, right? And I can click on that, and there you go. So now the user can see the channel, and the user could take part in it. Hello, John Christopher. Okay, so I just posted that little message. Let's jump over as John Christopher now and go in there, and there's the message. I'll say hi, Tom. Okay. So the other thing I want you to notice, though, is that that I, John Christopher, can see this private channel, but if I jump back over to Tom, Tom cannot see that channel. What we're going to do now, we're going to invite. So we'll go here. All right, you can say add member, and I'll say Tom Williamson. We'll add Tom to the channel. Okay, so we could say he's an owner. We'll just make him a member, and there we go. Let's jump back over here to Tom now. All right, and now in the app, you get notifications a little bit quicker, but you do have an activity button here that shows John has added you to the private channel. Okay, so let's jump back over, and now it's up here. You could have refreshed the browser as well. Hi, John. We're privately chatting now. There we go. So there's my little private message. If I jump back over to John Christopher, there is the message right there. Okay. Okay, so very easy to add channels, invite somebody to a channel, not really too much going on there. Let's jump back over here to the Teams Admin Center. All right, and let's just refresh the browser here so that everything's showing up. All right. So you'll see the two people that are added there now. Let's click channels, and there it is. So there's the private channel. Again, I can click on these channels, and I can see the members of the channels, right? I can also remove members from a channel if I want. So if I wanted to remove Tom, I could from here. All right. So again, all in all, very easy, very quick and straightforward to create channels through all these graphical tools. Of course, you also can work with channels using PowerShell as well. So let me go and I'm just going to hit start on my computer and search the keywords PowerShell. I'm going to right click and run PowerShell as an administrator. We'll get into PowerShell now, and I'm going to do a search, get command -noun star. Let's do the word channel star, and we can see the commands for channel. So there's a get channel command. There is also a new team channel command, and there is a remove team channel command, right? And if you want to add users and team user and all that, they show you that. Now, of course, the first thing I need to do is connect to Teams, right? So we'll say connect dash Microsoft Teams. I'm going to hit enter. And granted, I've already installed Teams on the Teams module and all that. You should know how to do that. If you don't, you should be able to look that up. But that is something that I've gone over. Let me lower this window a little bit. There we go. Okay, so I am connected. So the first thing, again, I want to encourage you to understand how to do here is how do I get help? All right. Well, I prefer just to do a quick Google or Bing search on the command. So if I wanted to do that, I could go right here. I'm going to just highlight it and right click it. It's going to copy that command. I'm going to go to Google or Bing. In this case, I'll just go to Google because it's already there, and do a search for that command. Okay. New team channel. If I click on that, they show an example of how to use this command. Here's an example of how to use this command right here. Okay. So I'll copy it. Let's jump back into PowerShell. First thing I want to do is say get team. Hit enter. This is going to show my teams. All right. And then I'm going to right click and I'm just going to paste this in there. And what we'll do is we'll copy. So you have channel demo. I'll just copy this group ID right here, and we will we'll paste it right here. There we go. And then the display name, I can name it whatever I want to name it, right? I'll say PowerShell channel, right? Now, also, if we go back and look at this article, they do tell you what the parameters are and all of that. And they even show some other examples. Like I could say membership type, we'll say private or public, right? So let's do that. Let's do membership type will be public in this case. So we'll hit enter. All right, and it says can't validate the parameter. What I chose, let's look at the parameters on membership type. Oh, standard. What was I thinking? Yep. Lost my brain there for a second. Sorry. Standard. Not public. There we go. So we've now created that, right? So I should be able to go back over here. Let's minimize this. Let's go to channels. Let's refresh the browser. And channels and see if it's there. Yep, it's there. In fact, let's go over to the app itself, and there's the channel. Okay, and because I made it a standard channel, it should show up for Tom Williamson as well, and it does. Okay, so all that works. Now, what about if we want to remove a channel, right? Well, we can do the same thing. We can do a search for remove-team channel. There's the article on it, and we can get help if we need to on how to do it, right? So we'll just paste that. Let's one thing we need to do though, we have a get-team channel, right? That we need to do, and it wants to know the group ID, right? So we'll paste the group ID in. All right, so there's the channel right there, right? PowerShell channel. So we'll go right here, copy it, paste that in. Oops, it didn't copy. Let's try that again. Copy. All right. So we'll right click the command, put the actual team channel ID in there. And again, I know this is a lot of trouble. It seems like a lot of trouble. It is a lot of trouble. But if you started learning how to run scripts and things like that, this kind of technique knowing this can come in handy. This is not a scripting, I'm not getting into scripting here. That's outside the scope of what we're learning, but it is something you can learn, and it can come in handy to understand these fundamentals. Okay, so we'll put in the display name PowerShell channel, and we are going to remove that channel. And there you go. We've now removed it. Should be removed anyway. Let's go back over here and let's refresh. And there it is, it's gone. And with that said, I'm done with this team, so I'm actually going to get rid of the team now. I no longer need the team, so we're just going to delete the team as well. And there we go, team is gone. All right, well hopefully now you have a much better understanding of how to manipulate channels in Microsoft Teams. I'd now like to take a quick look at dealing with channel settings in Teams. So I'm just going to go right here. I'm inside the Microsoft Teams app, the web-based version of it. I'm going to click to create a team real quick, and we're just going to call this, we'll make it public. We'll call it Channel Settings Demo. That'll be the name of the team. Click Create. All right. So we're just creating the team here. All right, and so if we go right here, we'll add a channel. We'll just call this test, standard channel, add. All right, now we'll go right here and we're going to click on the channel, right? We're going to go up here, click the little ellipse symbol, okay? And you'll notice that we've got a few different options here as far as the channel goes. Okay, for one, we have a manage channel option. We're going to go ahead and click on that. When we come into that manage channel option, we've got channel settings. That's really what I want to look at with you right now. So if we go here, it says set channel moderation preferences. So right now channel moderation is off. Okay, so if I want, I can turn that on, and we can allow moderation to occur on the channel. Okay, meaning somebody can go through there and moderate what people are saying and all of that. So who can moderate? Right now, me, I'm the team owner, so I can moderate. Who can start a new post? Only moderators. Okay. And then it says team member permissions. Allow members to reply to channel messages. We are currently allowing that. Allow members to pin channel messages. We are allowing that. Allow bots to submit channel messages. So that's if we are using any kind of like apps that utilize bots inside of a channel. We can, allow chat bots and all that. So we are currently allowing that. And lastly, we allow connectors to submit channel messages as well. So a connector would be the ability to allow teams to connect to certain web-based applications that can generate messages. Okay. Example that I've used this before with as a programmer working on some development projects. We've had connectors that when we were doing version control, when we were making changes to our application, whenever a change would be submitted to our version control, it would post in a channel that the change had been made. And so that's the idea of connecting your apps and all that. I'm not really diving deep into connectors in this video. I just wanted to throw that out there as an example. Okay. All right. So that is how permissions works. Very quick, easy to jump right in. There's not really a lot going on here, although Microsoft does occasionally change the screen. So don't be surprised if it might look a little different on your end if you're doing this with me. They do change these things on occasions. All right, last thing I'm going to do is just delete this team. I no longer need the team, so we're just going to go ahead and click delete. And there we go. Let's take a look in this video at how we can manage Teams channel policies. So here we are on portal.microsoft.com. We're going to click the show all ellipse symbol, and we're going to open up the Teams Admin Center. All right. And all we had to do was just click Teams there. That's going to bring us into the Teams Admin Center. Once we get into the Teams Admin Center, we're going to drop down the Teams drop down, and you're going to see a blade called Teams Policies. We're going to go ahead and click on that. And the first thing we'll see is that we have the global org-wide default policies that everyone has access to, essentially, And if we click on that, you can see that the different policies that are available here, or different settings, sorry, in the policy that's available are all set to on. So right now we can create private channels. Users can create private channels. They can create shared channels. They can invite external users to a shared channel, and they can join external shared channels. So that's all turned on by default for the global org-wide. Now let's create a policy. All right, and we'll just call this restricted channel policies, and we're gonna not allow the creation of private channels. All right, not allow the creation of shared, not allow invite, and not allow join external shared channels. So we're going to make that the opposite. All right, at that point, if we wanted to apply this to somebody, we can click group policy assignment, we can click add, and we could assign this to whatever group we want to assign this to. All right, so we would need a group for that we want this to go to, and we could assign that to a specific group, right? So let's go here and let's go back over to portal.microsoft.com. Let's go to users. Let's click, let's go to teams and groups. Let's go to active teams and groups. All right, we'll click add. We'll call this a restricted team demo. That'll be the name of the group. All right, we'll click next, assign an owner. I'll make myself the owner. Again, it does not matter if you have the same users as me. And we'll put myself in here. And I'll also put Tom Williamson, who is sort of my little demo user I've been playing around with. So we'll click next. All right, we'll call this restricted team demo, will be the email address. All right, make it public or private. We'll create the team and we'll click next. So there we go. So we are going to have it create a team. We're creating the group, which will obviously create the team as well. All right, so that's done. Let's jump back over to the Teams Admin Center now, and I am going to refresh my browser real quick. Okay, so here we are on this, again, how did we get here? We drop down, go to Team Policies, Group Policy Assignment, click Add. Okay, we've got the group now called Restricted Team Demo. We'll add that group, give it the policy, Restricted Channel Policy, and we're going to go ahead and confirm. Now, it does warn you that this may take some time to take effect depending on the number of users in the group, and changes can be rolled back immediately. All right, so there you go. We've now applied that. All right, so if we go to portal.office.com, or you also Microsoft365.com, we'll go to Teams. That's going to bring us into the Teams app. All right, now you'll see the restricted group or the restricted team demo here, and if we expand that out, all right, so we have the ability, if we want to create a channel, we'll go right here to create a channel. If you remember what we did in the policy, going back over here, we turned all this off. So create private channel, create shared channel is off, invite external users, join external shared channel, all that's been turned off. So if I try to create a private channel right now, let's see if it'll let me. All right, so right out of the gates here, where I used to have an option that would let me select private channel, you can see that that option is no longer available. Okay, so it is not letting me do that. All right, so we can already tell that this is, this is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. All right, so the policy has taken effect. All right. Okay, with that said, I am going to go ahead and remove this. I don't need the policy anymore. I just wanted to demonstrate that. And I'll go back over here to Manage Teams, and I'm going to go ahead and delete that team as well. I don't need the team anymore. All right, but hopefully now that helps you understand setting team channel policies. I now want to take a look at dealing with messaging policies in Teams. So here we are on portal.microsoft.com. I'm going to click Show All and go to the Teams Admin Center by clicking on Teams. All right. Now, the messaging policies is something that we have global policies of. We can also apply policies to groups if we want. Let's take a look. Here we are on the Teams Admin Center. We're going to go down here to where it says Messaging Policies, and you can see that we have a global org-wide default policy that everyone is associated with, but we can also create a policy if we want as well. Call it, restricted policy if we want. We could make it more restrictive, okay? Or if this was something we wanted to apply to a department, like a group like sales, we could do that, right? Anyway, we can go through here. Here's some of the things. Most of these are self-explanatory. We can hover over the letter I or the little I information bubble to find more information, but most of these are pretty self-explanatory. Owners can delete sent messages. We could turn that on or all. Delete sent messages. We could, allow that or deny it. Delete chat. Edit sent messages. Read receipts. We could have that turned on or turned off if we want. Chat if we want. This gets into, they tell you with this that people in your organization can read and write messages. Chat with groups, Giphy or Jiffy, as lots of people like to call it. These are the little animated images. Memes in conversations. We have a content moderation for that too, by the way. Memes in conversations, stickers in conversations can be added. We can turn all that off if we want. This is going to be our restricted policy anyway. URL previews. So give a preview, a link if somebody puts it in there. Report inappropriate content. People can do that if they want. Translate messages. Immersive reader for messages. Send urgent messages using priority notifications. We can do that. Be able to send urgent messages. Create voice messages. We can have that turned on if we want. On mobile devices, display favorite channels above recent chats. Have that turned on or off. Remove users from group chats. We can do text predictions. So suggested replies. Chat permission role. Now this one I wanted to drill into just a little bit. A couple things here I want to mention. You have restricted permissions, limited permissions, and full permissions. Microsoft has a little article here where they get into that. So with full permissions, it's ideal for educators who they're kind of gearing this towards the logic of maybe a school system, but ideal for educators who should have full access to students and other staff members. They can start chats with any user in the environment. Users full access are expected to supervise the chats they participate in. Now, limited permissions. Here's the big difference. This role is ideal for staff members who should only have supervised access to students and have full access to other staff and educators. They can start chats with any full or limited user, but can't start chats with restricted users. Okay. And then restricted user, this role is ideal for students who need to be supervised. They can only start chat with users who have full permissions. They can participate in any conversation that a user with full permissions starts and invites them. So this is some good information to kind of go off of if you were dealing with like an education environment that could be managed here. Users with full chat permissions can delete any message. Okay, and then finally video messages, we can allow that or not allow that. I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so there's some of the things that I've turned on and off for this sales messaging. If we were going to, let's just change it to restricted messaging, and then we'll hit save. All right, and at that point we've created it. Now if we wanted to apply this, as always, we go here to group policy, we click add, we specify the group, and then we can link the policy. Okay, and that's how we can apply the policy. All right, and I'm going to just delete that because I don't really need it. But that is how we are going to use messaging policies in Teams. Hey, this is John Christopher. I hope you enjoyed getting to experience a little bit of this course, and I hope you'll join me on the full adventure. If you'll check the description of this video, you'll see a link that'll show you how you can get access to the full course. Now, in the full course, you're going to learn how to set up a practice environment where you can practice hands-on, and I'm going to provide you with lots of virtual simulations that you can do 24/7. All you need is a web browser. So I hope you'll join me, and I hope you'll also give me a like and subscribe. I'm trying very, very hard to get this channel to build and grow, and so I hope you'll take the time to do that.